Hey everyone, Jim Haas with Blaze. I'm going to walk you through the process of swapping a valve on one of our gas grills. Now, depending on the model you have, the valve itself might look a little bit different, but the same concept applies kind of across the board on this. Let's get into it. First thing you're going to want to do is turn off the gas, whether it's natural or propane. Shut down that gas line completely. Take out your drip tray, making sure the drip tray is clean before you pull it out. And then pull the grates off of your grill. If you're on a cart, you're going to have these security screws securing it to the cart. So you want to take off the grates to access those. If you are in an island or a insulated jacket, more than likely the grill head is just slid into place. There's going to be no security screws, but if there are, that's where you're going to find them. So once you take those screws out, you will be able to release the grill head from the cart, and you just want to move it forward just a couple inches just to access the two screws on either side of the control panel so that you can release that front panel. So two screws on either side, you want to undo those. And then once those are released, you're going to pull the knobs off of the front panel. And underneath each knob, you'll find two small screws holding in the bezel, holding the bezel to the body of the grill. There's going to be two each on each bezel. Once those are released, the control panel will fall free for the most part. Now be careful when taking this off on that front right corner. The switches are still going to have wires attached to your lighting system. You can just carefully lean that control panel down, rest it on the ground for the time being. Each valve is held onto the manifold with a single Phillips head screw that attaches from the bottom. So once you release that screw, it's going to release a small bracket that holds that valve onto the manifold. It will then release itself pretty easily. Here's where things differ from the old days. When we used to order a replacement valve, you would order it gas specific, propane or natural gas. It would come with that brass orifice. It no longer does. So you need to take a 6 millimeter nut driver, carefully unscrew that existing brass orifice and swap it over to the new valve. Now be careful when you're unscrewing this that you don't drop it like I just did. There it goes. Luckily I found it pretty easily. Uh, Put the existing orifice onto the new valve, tighten it down only by hand, only a couple of threads just to get it started, and then with the nut driver, tighten it down onto the valve. You don't need to crank it down, just make sure it's barely snug, and that's going to do it. Now install the new valve onto the manifold. There is a rubber gasket that sits right over the opening where the gas comes through. Make sure that is seated really nice and firm. And then take your bracket and your Phillips head screw and just the opposite of what you did before, tighten it down onto the manifold. I always recommend doing this by hand. You don't want to use drills or anything. You don't want to strip anything out. Once everything is tightened down, just barely snug, it's going to be good. No reason to crank any of this stuff down with any amount of force. Now, carefully put your control panel back into place. Kind of make sure it's seated properly around all the valve stems that are coming out. You'll know if it's not seated exactly right. It kind of fits in just so, and then start to reinstall the bezels. And once the bezels are all back in place, you can line up the side edges of the control panel and put these side screws back in. This might get a little tricky. These holes tend to be very exacting the way they line up, but be patient with it. And once that's all back together, put your knobs back on the front panel and then slide the grill head back into place. So if you're on that cart, remember you got those security screws you want to put back in place. And then reinstall your cooking grates, and don't forget the drip tray. So there you go, the changing of the valve. If you've got a newer LTE Plus Blaze model with the backlit knobs, it's going to have that mechanism right behind the knob. So once you pull the bezel and all that off, it's just one more thing you got to line up before you put everything back together. Nothing too crazy, just more tedious than anything. And always after any repairs, do yourself a favor, do a leak test, and make sure you have no gas leaks anywhere. If you want to know how I do the leak test, you can check out my video on initial setup, and I kind of run through all that on that one. So there you go. Hopefully this helps, and cheers.